You might wonder, what does school climate have to do with reading? Well, reading cannot take place unless you have the conditions for learning, because reading is learning. The business world figured out the importance of climate a long time ago. You remember the book that Jim Collins wrote, Good to Great? That's the one that most people remember, but he also wrote a book, Built to Last, which to me is just as compelling or more compelling than Good to Great, because Built to Last, he looked at companies that were successful over a long period of time. And he came to a lot of conclusions, but one of the conclusions he came to was a company that sustains success does so because they have a positive workplace climate. They're companies that are successful for a short period of time, and one of the most compelling reasons why they're not successful for a long period of time is because they disregarded the importance of climate. If you want to read a very compelling article about the importance of workplace climate, go to December the 1st, 2015 Harvard Business Review article on workplace climate. In the research they did and the research they reviewed, they found the same thing. The businesses that focus on the importance of workplace climate are those that are successful. Those are the ones who keep their employees. And you know, when you replace an employee, the research shows that costs you 20% of that employee's salary to replace that employee. And the main reason why an employee leaves is because workplace climate. Also, a Gallup poll that was taken of tens of thousands of employees found the same thing. They were more motivated by a positive workplace climate than other incentives, including money. They wanted to feel like going to work was an enjoyable thing to do. And if, for example, they were out of work for a few days and came back, somebody missed them. Somebody asked them, "Are you okay? Were you okay? Anything you need?" That was the most important thing in the Gallup poll. Another example, just quickly, is not too long ago, the Army created a climate component in their commander training. In their officer training, the Army now has a component on climate. And in the Navy, if you're a senior officer and you're assigned a new command, guess what you have to do within the first 90 days? You have to administer the Navy's climate survey. And you have to do that every 9 to 12 months. So ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you this. If climate is that important in the business world and that important in our military, why do we think it's not important in our schools? And I'll be the first to tell you, and Martha Ann has heard this many times before, educators have been slow to realize the importance of climate. But that day has got to stop. And recommendations from commissions like this can help us do that. Now, we're making a lot of progress, but we can't do things in isolation. I like this quote because if we think a system is not working, we can complain about it all day. But until we develop another system that's better, guess what's going to happen? Nothing's going to change. So let's talk about school climate. Just for a second now, think about your high school. Close your eyes if you have to, but think. Take a deep breath and think about and recall your high school. Think about high school, your high school. You have it in your mind? Okay, let me ask you this. Are you thinking about math? Are you thinking about science? Are you thinking about social studies? Your recollection of high school is climate. It's so powerful that it stays with us for a lifetime, so how can we dismiss it? In fact, climate is so ubiquitous, it's everywhere. There's climate in this room now. You either feel uncomfortable or comfortable. You feel like you can talk to your peers or not. You feel like you're welcome here or not. You can't get away from climate. It's in every one of our schools and every one of our classrooms. Here's the textbook definition. You see it's related to norms and goals and values and social interactions and access. There is compelling body of research that's growing every day about the importance of climate in schools. And this is research, ladies and gentlemen, from around the world. We've looked at now we're up to 800 studies we looked at around the world, and it doesn't matter the size of the school, the location of the school climate matters. Look at all the impacts you can see there. I won't read all that to you. Look at the impact it has on children. And it goes on and on. We could talk about this the entire day. All the impact it has on children, and therefore the impact it has on them learning, and therefore the impact it has on them learning to read. So how do we change it? We have to change minds and systems. So how do we improve school climate? Many years ago, the Department of Education started looking around at what is the best framework for improving school climate, and we found that positive behavior interventions and supports is a research-based framework for improving school climate. It's used in about 30,000 schools around the United States, several thousand more around the world. So we implemented and encouraged schools to implement PBIS as a framework for improving school climate. And this is why school climate is research-based, but you see that it's based on research. It's based on the research of human behavior. It's based on an understanding that human behavior with children, as well as with adults, is complex. It's also based on changing behavior that's complex within a system that can be complex, and that is a school. But guess what the focus is on the changing of behavior through PBIS and changing the framework of the school and improving school climate? The focus is on adults. That's the secret sauce. That's why the doors are closed, because I'm telling you, a secret is this focuses on the behavior of adults. Because, ladies and gentlemen, there's no doubt that whoever controls the climate of a school is not children, it's the adults in the building. They control the climate of the school. It doesn't matter where the school is located. It doesn't matter the community. The adults control the climate in a school. So therefore, they control the conditions for learning. Why does it work? That's a busy slide. There are three things very quickly. It minimizes, it reduces triggers for overreactions. Overreactions of who? Students? No, the overreaction of adults. Also, the second one is very important too, because think of it yourself. If you knew the difference between defiant behavior and symptomatic behavior, would your reaction be the same? If you thought a student was reacting that way because of mental health issue or trauma, would you react the same way as if you thought that student was being defiant to you? Would your reaction be the same? This is where you say, no. And the third thing, how about this? I'm glad you're sitting down. How about this? We focus on the positive. Wow, how radical is that? But so much in schools focus on consequences and the negative. We're always chasing the problem because we're consequence driven. As long as you're chasing the problem, two things are going to happen. You won't catch it and you're going to wear yourself out. So we went to PBS, and in 2009 we had about 80 schools implementing PBS. Now we're up to 1,117. That's about half of the schools in Georgia. But implementing PBS is not enough. You have to implement it with fidelity. To say you're implementing PBS or anything in your workplace, if you implement something, it's not going to be effective unless you implement it with fidelity. So that's important, and we have a way to measure that. And when you see the 530, that's a 183% increase. 530, what's happened to the other half of that? Well, they're on their way. They're moving into implementing fidelity, because this is a process, this is a systems change. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while to change attitudes and behavior and change a system. And you can see the location of the schools in Georgia that have had the training. The orange are school districts where 90, 100% of the schools have been trained in PBIS. Also, I just want to mention this too, because you wonder, well, sometimes what gets measured gets done. You've heard that phrase many times. We thought it was very important that the school climate be measured. So we worked with the legislature a few years ago on two areas. One was schools have to create a school management system. And that was followed with a law where a school has to receive a school climate rating. And the idea was to have a school climate rating that was prescriptive, descriptive, and something that you use that you could look into and find out why is the school climate rating low or high for that matter. So that's in statute that we have to have a school climate rating for each school. And it's linked to the College and Career Ready Performance Index. And it's made up of 4 quadrants so that we don't rely just on one element to measure school climate. It's based on these 4: student survey, staff survey, and parent survey. We have over 1 million students a year take the survey. It's 1.3 million students take the survey. It's the largest student survey in the United States. It's anonymous. We have about 150,000 parents take the survey, and about 75 to 80% of our teachers take the survey. It's very rich data, and you can look at the data all the way down to the school level. Also, we have the student discipline data we look at. Sometimes you look at the survey and the data to see if there's a mismatch. For example, if the data shows there's not a bullying problem, but you may see in the survey there is a bullying problem. And then the other is the survey data, where we drive into the surveys and look at those particular questions about drugs and bullying and alcohol, the dangerous incidents, sort of the school safety component, and then attendance, and that's staff attendance and students attendance. And that gives us a rating of a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being a low school climate rating and 5 being a good one. And this is how the schools ranked in Georgia so far. 81% of the PBS schools get a 4 or 5 compared to 55% of the other schools. But if they're implementing it with fidelity, it's over 90%. So what does the data show, and how does that relate to reading and learning conditions and that sort of thing? Well, here's some data for you. If you have a school climate rating of 1 or a school climate rating of 5, look at the difference in the College and Career Ready Performance Index, which is our measure of school progress. A 30-point difference based on school climate. So when I'm talking to principals, which slide do you think I start with? Right, this one. Look at 3rd grade reading proficiency or above in the school climate rating. Over a 30-point difference. 30-point difference. So do you think we're going to get the students to the level of reading that we want them to be if the school climate is negative? It's just not likely to happen, ladies and gentlemen. 3rd grade reading proficiency, College and Career Ready Performance Index. If you're going to have a good score on the CCRPI, your kids have to be reading. And look at the high school graduation rate, and remember now, we're talking about the linkage between school climate, conditions for learning, and reading. Let this one sink in for a second. What is this telling us? If you're reading proficiently at the end of the 3rd grade, you're in the game. It doesn't matter your station in life, you're in the game if you're reading proficiently. But you're not going to read the conditions for learning, you're probably not going to be there for reading proficiently if the school climate is negative. Look at the out-of-school suspension since 2007. Over 50,000 fewer out-of-school suspensions. Students don't learn when they're not in school, right? Reducing out-of-school suspensions not only improves conditions for learning, it also increases opportunities for learning. You see the numbers have gone down even while the student population has gone up. This is the way we show this to schools so they can use the data in a visual format when they're talking to staff and when they're talking to parents. This visualization of the data. This also shows a visualization of the data, because here's the point, ladies and gentlemen, the school climate rating, for example, doesn't help anybody unless it's descriptive and prescriptive. But a school can dig into the data that creates the school climate rating and find out why they have a 1 and come up with strategies to improve the climate. Also, and get this too, ladies and gentlemen, they can find out why they have a 5. We tell schools all the time that probably everybody in this room can name a high school that one time was doing very well and is now struggling. And what's the first reason we say happened? Well, the demographics change. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, demographics change all the time. Are you really going to hang it on that excuse? One of the reasons it declined probably was because of the change in the school climate. And you know what's part of school climate? Expectations. So we tell schools you may have a 85 or 90 on the CCRPI, but if your school climate rating is a 1, 2, or a 3, guess what you're going to lose if you don't improve the climate? You can lose what you have if you don't pay attention to the climate. But a system like a school climate cannot work in isolation. That's why, as Joy told you earlier, it's part of the 4 pillars of positive learning climate, and you've heard Ariane talk about that. I'm just going to very quickly end with a few points. One is the suspension rate of child care centers is higher than that of K-12 education. that always strikes the audience is unbelievable. But the research shows a positive classroom climate in early learning centers can be critical to children's learning. Children's mental health issues are a significant impediment to learning. Yet, can you believe that 70 to 80% of our children with mental health issues do not receive therapeutic services? 70 to 80%. And they're in our classrooms every day. But we do know that improving school climate gives those students a chance. Imagine having a mental health issue, whether it's temporary or long-term, a traumatic experience, and you come to a school where nobody seems to care whether you're there or not. The building's dirty, the bathrooms are filthy, nobody interacts with you, nobody misses you, nobody talks to you. Can you imagine how that student feels? That student doesn't really have a chance. And look at the last bullet, and no, that's not a typo. Our students missed 13 million days of instruction last year. 13 million days. And other than health issues, you know what the other issue is one reason why they missed so many days? You can link the climate rating to attendance. So Joy, here are the recommendations that we bring to you related to school climate, understanding that none of these recommendations should be viewed in isolation because they're part of the larger picture that you referred to as the 4 pillars. But recommendation that we expand PBS to all public schools with a framework to improve school climate because we know that it works, and that would be funding for more school climate specialists in the recess. But here's the reason for the expansion to more school climate specialists in the recess. This is to embrace the child care centers. We already have a school climate specialist in the recess now, but if we had one there who could work primarily with the child care centers, because we're trying to blur the line between K-12 education and 0 to 8 education. We want that to be a seamless route. So if they have a positive climate in a child care center, then they come into the K-12 system, embrace a positive climate, then their conditions for learning are going to be greatly improved. And you can see also, we know that mental health first aid training, which is awareness of what is mental health and also therefore what is mental illness. So we have staff members that know the difference between defiant behavior and symptomatic behavior, for example, and also expand the Georgia Apex project, which brings mental health therapists into our schools. It's a very quick presentation, and you can contact me if you have questions about anything that I've covered today. Thank you, Joy.